Hi and welcome back to the course. In this video we're going to be running our API and testing it out. There are a couple of things that we have to make sure of first. The first one, we have to make sure to delete the configuration property of Nginx, that is the default. So if we go and do sudo rm/etc/nginx/sites enabled /default. You have to make sure to remove the default configuration file for Nginx, or else whenever you try to access your API, the first thing that it's going to do is it's going to give you a 404 not found, because the default configuration property for Nginx will be the first one that gets loaded. So make sure to delete the default there. Once we've done that, which I've done already, we have to make sure to do sudo systemctl reload nginx and then sudo systemctl restart nginx. That will reload the configuration for nginx and then restart nginx. Okay, now that we've restarted nginx, make sure to have sudo systemctl start uwsgi_items_rest. Make sure to have it started. In my case, it's already started, but make sure to have it started. Now that Nginx is running and uwsgi is running, uwsgi will load our Flask app, so we don't have to start it ourselves, and everything should be good to go. And Postgres is also running in the background as well. Okay. Let's go over to Postman and give it a go. So I'm going to open the section 6 collection, because it's going to be the same collection as section 6. We've not changed anything yet. We've used the same API for Heroku and DigitalOcean. And we're going to make sure to go over to the environments and change the URL to be our service URL. You can find out the server URL in DigitalOcean, the DigitalOcean console, the control panel, or if you're on a Mac, you'll see it up here, sshjose@9585.15.100. So what I'm going to do here is put 95.85.15.100. Also make sure that the protocol being used is HTTP and not HTTPS. Remove the S if it is there, because we've not set up SSL for our server yet. And therefore, if we put HTTPS, it wouldn't work. So go ahead. And then let's give it a go. I'm going to try to register first of all. And it tells me that a user with a username already exists because I've been playing around with it. Let's try to authenticate. Gives me back a token. We can retrieve items, and we can create items, and so on. An error occurred. We can potentially see the error. It's probably something to do with the store ID, of course. I don't know if you guys remember. I mentioned earlier on in the course that SQLite doesn't enforce foreign key constraints, whereas Postgres does. But what we can do is make sure to create the store before we create the item. That's what the constraint is. In a foreign key constraint, we're saying that this item we're creating here is related to the store with ID 1, but that store doesn't exist. So SQLite was saying, you know what, whatever, I don't care. Whereas Postgres is a bit more sort of advanced, and it checks that the store exists. So let's create the store first. We're going to post this store there. And as you can see, that works. And now we can go back to posting the item with store ID 1, and that gets created. If we then go and get the stores, for example, remember this is going to send a list of stores and their items back. Now we get the store name, which is test, and the items, which is also test, which is not a very good name, but nevertheless, that's that there. So as you can see, everything works, but deploying to your own server is not as easy as it is deploying to Heroku. You have to do a lot more stuff. You have to set up Postgres, you have to set up Nginx, you have to understand how uwsgi works, you have to understand a bit about permissions, and things like that. It's not the easiest thing. So if you want to develop a product quickly, you want to you want to get it out on the market ASAP, essentially, Heroku is a good option. You don't have to deal with any server stuff or anything like that. However, it reaches a point where Heroku gets really expensive really quickly, so it's worth considering deploying to your own servers once you have a bit more traffic and a bit more of a need for sort of performance. However, as you grow more and more, controlling all of these servers does become quite time-consuming. So at that point, then you may consider migrating to either something like Amazon Web Services or hiring somebody to deal with these servers for you. Many companies have their infrastructure teams and things like that, which do this sort of job, as well as many other things. So software development, not only about programming, but also about a lot of other things related to it. So something to keep in mind as you develop more and more. So that's it for this section. We've learned how to deploy to our own server, and now we have to look at performance, which we're going to look at using Varnish, and we can look at creating our own sort of final project as well, which is going to be very interesting. So that's it for this section, and I'll see you in the very next one.